long been expected to assume a prominent role in both global and African politics. Consequently, successive administrations and the articulate public have often espoused the belief that Nigeria possesses a manifest destiny to emerge as a leading voice and actor in African and international affairs. However, several challenging issues have dominated Nigeria's foreign policy across various governments, with each government having distinctive priorities and style. Although guided by the same general principles, the successive administrations have not necessarily shared the same perception of the international system or conception of Nigeria's role in it, nor of the strategies for attaining our foreign policy objectives. The focus, nature, and dynamism of their foreign policy engagements have been stirred by contending domestic, socio-political, economic, security, and external challenges, which over the years have hampered Nigeria's expected performance in the international scene. The implication of this development is that Nigeria is not appropriately positioned in the new global order, and that there is an urgent need to re-strategize and reformulate Nigeria's foreign policy to capture the internal and external dynamics of the Nigerian state and maintain respect and relevance in the international system. A new beginning. The administration of President Bola Tinubu came into power at a historical period of global geopolitical and geostrategic alignments and realignments, which are all dramatically shaping Nigeria's foreign policy and external relations. The Tinubu administration unveiled its foreign policy agenda termed Nigeria's 4D Renewed Foreign Policy Doctrine, comprising democracy, demography, development, and diaspora. The 4D Foreign Policy Doctrine is said to represent a deliberate shift towards more international, intentional, dynamic, and value-driven foreign relations. While an assessment of President Tinubu's foreign policy direction may be premature, a clearer articulation of the essentials of the 4D doctrine in terms of its achievable, concrete policies and actions is urgently required. Clearly, repositioning Nigeria as a global actor and achieving the goals of the 4D doctrine requires fixing Nigeria's domestic challenges, tackling the prevalence of corruption and multidimensional poverty, guaranteeing the security of Nigeria and Nigerians, and building a strong economy and currency. Moreover, it is essentially important to silence the guns within the states as well as throughout the Gulf of Guinea and the Sahel. At this juncture, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I will speak on my secondary area of scholarship, which is gendered political participation in Nigeria. Women and political participation in Nigeria. The global power structure created by the struggle for political transition has and will have great consequences for the struggle for gender equality. From time immemorial, the contribution of women to the development of societies is comparable to that of men. Yet, their participation in formal and informal structures and processes where decisions are made remains largely insignificant. According to the Beauvoir, representation of the world, like the world itself, is the work of men. They describe it from their own point of view, which they confuse with absolute truth. Thus, the continued exclusion of female actors and their experiences in politics radically faults the field and calls for the dismantling of internal power structures that drive gender inequality and hinder societal progress. Issues in gender participation in Nigerian politics is replete with continued marginalization and disempowerment of women in the political process. Following the transition from one administration and political structure to another, the participation of Nigerian women politically has remained dreadfully low. with women occupying below 10% of political posts since 1960. This is an eloquent testament of the persistence of male dominance and gender prejudice in the political realm, probably not in the University of Ibadan. The outcomes of the 2023 elections specifically provoked misgivings regarding the participation and representation of women and underscored the persistent systemic restrictions on women's representation in Nigerian party politics. As new conceptions of public and political life emerge, and as the world goes through a geopolitical and geoeconomic transition, women are increasingly moving from the other room and the kitchen to the limelight in the global governance processes. Male-dominated structures are no longer able to meet the challenges of the world is facing today. What will tomorrow's world look like? Predicting the future of global politics is challenging, but evidently we are living through a period of radical changes in the global power structure. Where it may take us has no precise answer. With diverse interests and identities of emerging powers worldwide, it is probable that we will witness the formation of a unified but adaptable counter-hegemonic bloc, flexible minilateral groups and forums, or the fragmentation of the current system into several small worlds and regional blocs. Clearly, the world is no longer unipolar or bipolar. The prevailing trajectory of change does appear to be leading towards a multipolar world where Western dominance is no longer assured. Events ranging from Russia's invasion of Ukraine to China's construction of artificial islands in the South China Sea, as well as the global economic and political impacts of new technologies like artificial intelligence and the development of lethal autonomous weapons, suggest that the emerging global order may be approaching a critical stage. The prevalence of nuclear weapons and the gradual retreat from established arms control agreements that have fostered global stability for decades also represent an ongoing peril to the survival of humanity. Another problem to global peace and security has emanated from non-state actors or forces like ISIS, Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the like. These non-state actors represent a challenge that is likely to escalate rather than reduce over the next several decades. Of great concern is NATO's eastward expansion in Europe, as well as the war in Ukraine, both of which suggest that we are living through a new and dangerous edition of the Cold War. Also disconcerting is the Hamas-Israeli war and the US-UK airstrikes on the Houthi military sites in Yemen. These constitute great threats to global security. As middle and small powers, as well as non-state actors, seriously threaten and undermine global security and peace, nobody can predict where the dominoes will fall. However, a return to a multipolar world characterized by conflict is more than a fable. It is increasingly becoming more probable. On the African continent, over the past decades, uprisings, coups, and the activities of insurgents pose serious threats and risks for the broader region and Sahel security landscape. They also have the tendency to attract self-serving, paternalistic powers, particularly the US, China, and Russia. Certainly, the ferment in the Sahel, especially the withdrawal of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger from ECOWAS, calls for a major rethink of Nigeria's foreign policy. Two developments support this imperative. The first is Morocco's effort in December 2023 to build its ties with other African countries and promote and facilitate access of the Sahel countries to the Atlantic Ocean. The second development, also in December 2023, is a case instituted by South Africa against Israel at the World Court concerning the alleged Israeli genocidal conduct in the war against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Can Nigeria play a significant role in these two situations? For me, to realize the often repeated claim that Nigeria is the giant of Africa, Nigeria has to find ways to influence the processes, structures, and behaviors of the international system. As the new world order takes shape, an important lesson from history is for Nigeria to adopt a more dynamic foreign policy that considers the misalignments of its domestic politics, economy, and foreign relations. In other words, political leaders must make democracy work by strengthening its processes and institutions, as well as promoting inclusive political participation. National decision-making structures, including foreign policy making, must be gender responsive. Education as soft power. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, there is an irrefutable link between global power standing and education. A nation standing in the global arena is intricately linked to the strength of its education sector and the equitable compensation of its educators. At its core, Nigeria's education sector serves as the bedrock of its human capital formation, laying the groundwork for individual advancement and national progress. However, without adequate investment and support, the sector faces significant challenges that resonate across the country's socio-political and economic landscape. In the context of Nigeria's global positioning, a faltering education sector undermines the country's ability to compete effectively in the global marketplace. Furthermore, the underpayment of university lecturers, for instance, and the resulting brain drain deprives Nigeria of the expertise and talent needed to drive innovation and propel the nation forward in the emergent political structure. In essence, Nigeria's place in the world is intricately linked to the vitality of its education sector and the fair treatment of its educators. By prioritizing investment in education and by ensuring the equitable compensation of lecturers, Nigeria can enhance its global competitiveness and strengthen its influence on the world stage. Moreover, in the light of the expanding polycentric nature of the emerging multipolar world order, countries like the US, China, India, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and other East Asian countries are employing soft power, like education, as the engine of prosperity to improve their image abroad, cultivate power, increase their global influence, and shape the agenda of world politics. Ironically, whilst a growing number of nations are creating globally competitive educational systems, the wave of incessant kidnapping of students in Nigeria poses serious threats to the Nigerian educational system. Only last week, about 300 pupils and teachers were kidnapped from Kaduna State by bandits. This phenomenon weakens the education system and diminishes Nigeria's power and standing on the world stage. No country grows beyond the level of its educational system. Yes. Students cannot be forced to choose between education and security. Protecting vulnerable school environments is crucial. Security must be ensured for the entire educational system as well as its infrastructure. Evidently, Nigeria's education system must be completely re-engineered if Nigeria is to meet the demands of the present cutting-edge, high-tech economy and maintain a favorable position in the dynamics of political power. Acknowledgement. There is